Thank you. Thank you for joining this session. My name is Thomas Bach, and I will present together with my colleagues Jonas and Carlos something that we have worked with together with Amazon, machine learning for computer vision in the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry. So I will tell you a little bit about what we're going to see here the next half hour. So the background, who is Novo Nordisk as a company, and then the challenges that we have seen in scaling some of our solutions. And then we will look into some practical examples of how that has materialized. And then we will look a little bit into the work we have done together with Amazon to the solutions to that problem. We will see some demos of a solution, and we will also see some high-level architecture of the solution that we have built. And then lastly, we will look into what will happen next with these kind of solutions. So, Novo Nordisk, that is a pharmaceutical company based in Denmark. We are nearly 100 years old company, mainly looking into diseases like diabetes. That has been our biggest market so far, but now also looking into treatment of obesity and rare diseases like bleeding disorder and so on. We are around 50,000 people worldwide in our research and also in our production. And as today we are nearly producing half of all insulin produced in the whole world. So digital, that is everywhere and in everything. For us, it's starting already in R&D when we look into how we develop our molecules and so on, and all the way through production and also into our supply chain at the end. So basically everything that is some kind of digital layer in it. We have been traditional a company which is quite regulated, and that also means that we will not be the front runner in trying out new technology, but that has actually changed. So now we are looking more and more into being at the forefront of technologies, building up capabilities within digital space and robotics and so on. So that is also what we are going to see a little bit further down the road in this presentation, is what are we going to do in the future with these new technologies. So how does that create value for us? So first of all, quality, doing our production flawlessly without any deviations and so on, and also being able to release our product instantly. Meaning that basically when we have produced it, we are also able to release it based on data from our production. Then we are able to say that everything is okay with this product and we can release. Today we rely a lot on testing and results, which can be weeks before we have the test results, and then we can release. So quality is very important, and digitalization of that is also quite important to do. The next step is to have a world-class performance. So also data in our production, being able to have robust processes so we can rely on the products that we produce. That is quite important as well. And then of course it all hopefully decreases the cost, so we can basically produce more medicine to our patient even faster and even cheaper. Looking into our ambition for being a pharmaceutical industry, also digitization our supply chain. Then we have, as many other companies, made this roadmap with a lot of different technologies which we are working with already today. We have more or less initiatives and products all over this map, from how to do paperless operation to end-to-end traceability and autonomous logistics. So we are basically taking our supply chain from the warehouse all the way through our production processes and all the way to our supply chain going out of our facilities. So I will hand over the presentation to Jonas, who will present a little bit more in depth of some of the technologies. Jonas.
Thank you. Yes, so as you can see, we have a lot of different initiatives going on within the tech space in our product supply. Now I'll try and narrow it a bit down to some of the initiatives where computer vision and machine learning is especially relevant. And we see kind of 4 areas being kind of the main contributors to this, or the main topics within this, and that is automation of manual work, real-time anomaly detection, process optimization, and real-time quality control. So these are kind of the areas where we have identified that it is relevant to look at computer vision combined with machine learning to solve problems. And more specifically, the one that we will be looking into today in the practical examples is automation of manual work. And to present that, we have brought a practical example where we have used machine learning and computer vision to solve an actual case. And this particular case is we call cartridge counting, and this is essentially a case where we need to count how many cartridges are in this box. A cartridge is a glass container that contains the drug, and it has a cap on top, and those are then placed in this acrylic box where there is approximately 370 in each box. So right now we have people counting some steps in some places of our supply chain, counting how many are there actually in the box. So it's a very good use case to use machine learning, also to handle this changing in environments that you could imagine when you have such a solution at scale in a global setting. So the way we are doing it is that we're basically capturing an image of the box seen from up top. So the box or the image is basically fed into to a machine learning model, where the machine learning model is finding the places in the image where there is a cartridge. And that is the model prediction. And then what we basically just do is that we then count how many locations of cartridges are there in the image. And that is our count. So it sounds quite simple and straightforward at this layer, but let's just take a step back and take it into a more of a general context of how it is at Novo Nordisk. We have a lot of these machine learning vision use cases. Very promising. There's a lot of benefit to be reaped from these. Then for many of these, we make a proof of concept. We develop something just to show that it's technically possible to do. And then we productionalize and scale it. Or that's at least the idea that we reach this point. Because what actually happens more often than not is that we end up at what we call the graveyard of successful POCs. So this is basically when we have a POC that is not possible for us to scale due to a lot of reasons. And now I'll take a concrete example of how that came to be with the cartridge counting use case. So here we had a machine learning model. It performed great. We wanted to implement it. So we said, yeah, let's implement it. But then came all the questions. How do we monitor it? How do we maintain it? How do we deploy new models? And how do we manage all of our data sets? And these were questions that we weren't really able to give a good answer to. So we realized that we needed a platform to handle all of this. We needed it for also developing and deploying and maintaining our machine learning models. So that is when we reached out to Amazon and basically came with a proposal or asked them for help to help us set up this specific use case. And we were offered this prototyping engagement where we basically have a six weeks together with some of their specialists that help us set up our use case on their platform. And to do this, we were a team of 6 people, and Most of the competencies were, of course, within machine learning. So we had some solution architects in machine learning from AWS side. And then we also had a solution architect in IoT, simply because we are dealing with something that needs to be deployed to the edge. So therefore, it was quite important that we had that aspect as well covered. And then, of course, we had somebody to organize it. So this was kind of what it took for us to reach the point of having something that could be used. Before we started the engagement, we of course also tried to kind of structure and formalize what we were expecting to get out of this engagement. So one of the things that was important for us was to understand the development flow when you're developing on the platform. How does it work when you're developing? And then the second one is the scalability potential. How does that change this aspect of not being able to scale, and how can we maybe avoid this graveyard of successful POCs where the reason for not being able to proceed is scalability. Then we have the next one, which is level of customization. So how much effort does it require to switch from one use case to another? How much do we need to change in this setup? And then, of course, also getting an idea of the cost of doing so. And then, very important to us, because we're a pharmaceutical company working in a regulated environment, traceability. So we need to be able to trace everything. We need to be able to show that this was the data that we trained it on. This was the model, type of model, and this was the time, and this was everything that had to do with it. And then finally, monitoring. So we need to be able to monitor all of the deployments we have for our models, because if we are talking about having it at scale, we need to be able to sit centrally and manage all of it. So now I've been talking a lot at a high level. Now I'll hand it over to Carlos, and he will talk a bit more into what we have actually done here.
Thank you, Jonas. So before we started this prototyping engagement, we had all the parts of the developing process running locally. So we have our local machine where we have all the different data processing, data labeling, the model training, or even the manual transfer of the model to the edge device where the model was running. All these parts, they were not interconnected, and we had to execute them individually and then make that connection locally in our local machine. And as you maybe know by experience, this is something that could become quite difficult, especially when you try to deploy those models and also to maintain them in production. So that's why we wanted to move to AWS, because the idea was to create kind of a pipeline that could help us to execute all these models automatically and also interconnect them in order to help us in this developing process. And here I will present to you what is the pipeline that we have created together with the prototyping team. And we have created this flow from data gathering to data labeling in the cloud. And then we have this pipeline that takes care of all the steps that we need to execute in order to train a machine learning model, deploy that model to the edge compute, and monitor those models in production. So just at the beginning of the pipeline, we can see that we have the data processing. This is a step where we process all the data. In this case, are images. So those images, for example, we can resize them. We resize those images. We can do also some data augmentation in that step. And another thing that we do in this data processing step is we generate 3 splits of the data set. So we generate the train, the validation, and the test data set that we will use during the pipeline. And after that process, after that step, we have a condition step. Either we can go for training a model with a predefined parameters that we know that they will perform well with our model, or we can execute the tuning step. This is basically a step that help us to explore a range of different combination of parameters in order to find the optimal hyperparameter setup for our model. So either if we choose one step or the other one, we will end up having a trained model. So that train model needs to be evaluated. So we move to the next step, that is the model evaluation. In that step, what we try to do is we use the test dataset, and we evaluate how this model performs with that unknown data. So after this evaluation step, we will get, and this is a feature that I will present to you afterwards, an evaluation report, where we will get all the performance metrics and all the inference of the testing dataset. And if we have a model that based on the evaluation report, that performance is well enough and means that we can deploy to the edge compute, we move to the next step, is the model registration. This is a step that allows us just to register a specific model that we know that performs well, and we create a specific version for that model. Then we are ready to deploy that model. So we use what we call the edge deployment step. This is a step where we use AWS services in order to optimize our model for a specific edge device platform. So we make that model faster and also executable in that specific edge device. And then once we have the model up and running on the edge device, we every time that we make a prediction, we get an image, or we also process that data. We take all this data and we send it to the cloud, where we perform the model monitoring. So we get all the input images, output images, and also the count of cartridges, and we process that data in the cloud in order to visualize it. That's another feature that I will show you later on. And maybe now you are asking yourself, okay, this is a prototyping engagement, how that looks in a timeline. So this is our plan. This is the 6-week plan that we had with the prototyping team. This is a quite ambitious plan in which we were looking into having 6 weeks a sprint. And as I mentioned before, we have different steps in this pipeline. And the way that we approach it is that we had a quite robust algorithm already. So we started with the model training step. But what we did during all these 4 weeks is that we were working on this specific state one by one. So maybe at some point I was working on the data processing step, while Jonas was working on the model training step. So we kind of split all the different steps. We work individually on those. And at the end, during week 2 and 3, we try to combine all these steps in a pipeline. So once we were quite satisfied with the pipeline and the performance of it, then we managed to squeeze all this developing part in 4 weeks and have 2 weeks that we use to repurpose that pipeline. So we use a second use case, in this case also vision, to repurpose the pipeline and to see if we are able to use the same pipeline, changing some of the things in order to develop a new use case. And right now I would like to show you a demo video that we recorded in the AWS Stockholm Summit, where you can see how we can have the box with all the cartridges in it. And then we have a camera stand where we place our industrial camera on top that is connected through USB to the edge compute, the edge device that we were talking about before. Then we have a screen where we have placed the user interface, where we can see that we have 372 cartridges in this moment. And for the demo, we will just take 2 of those cartridges. And we can see that once we take these 2 cartridges, we can go and capture an image that will be processed by the model and calculate how many we have. In this case, it counts 2 less, so we have 370. And we can also place again those cartridges and make a prediction again. And this is kind of a short demo video that allows us to show you how the system is working in real life. And one thing that I would like to emphasize here is that we are not using any external light. So this is the system that we had in our lab, and we didn't add any external light or cover in the camera. We just take it from our lab and put it in the summit. So basically the system was quite robust in order to perform correctly in different light conditions. And this is something that is quite important for us, because we need to work in a quite flexible environment. This is a solution that right now is static, but could be also placed in a robotic arm. And this is a flexible solution that allows us to change the camera position, even though the light condition is different. This is one of the advantages why we choose to go for machine learning instead of road-based algorithms. And right now, I would like to highlight two of the features that we have in our system. One of those is the monitoring part. So as I mentioned before, every time that we make a prediction, we capture an image, we process that image, and we count how many cartridges we have. All this information is sent to the cloud, where we perform the model monitoring. So in this case, you can see a QuickSight dashboard that is placed in AWS cloud. And we can see that for each timestamp, we can visualize how many cartridges we detect at that point. So for example, we can see, okay, in this point, we would like to see how many cartridges we detect. We had 372, right? So we can also visualize, okay, let's see what is the predicted image in this case. So we can visualize that the prediction was correct. So we were detecting all the cartridges that we had inside the box. But we can also have the case that we see that we have a low value, and we can explore and investigate what happened in that case, that specific timestamp. We see that we have 294 cartridges, and we can also visualize the predicted image. And just as a matter of the demo, we can see that was a hand that was placed on top of the cartridges. That could be a hand, that could be something that could happen in production. So we have the tool to monitor that performance and why this low value occurred during production. And the other feature that I would like also to present to you is the evaluation report. So as I mentioned before, once we have a trained model, we perform what we call the evaluation step. This step auto-generates a PDF report that contains some of the information about this execution of that pipeline. So we can see that we can get the execution time of that pipeline. We can also get the path for that input data set, so we can have all the traceability of which code for the model we use, together with which data set we use to train that model. And we can also get the performance metrics, just to see what is the performance of our model, together with all the testing images that you can see on the right. And I think now is the moment to make this relation, this connection between all the different steps that we talked before during the pipeline, how they look in AWS services. So which services from AWS we have used in order to create this pipeline and execute that specific step one by one. So we can see that we have S3, Amazon S3, that we use for data storage. We have also explored Amazon SageMaker ground truth, so for labeling all the images. And then we have used SageMaker pipelines in order to create each specific step in the pipeline and also combine them. So we have created a step for data processing. This is also used in SageMaker pipelines. We have used a step for training of the model, even the registration of that model. And once we have the model that is trained and is registered, we use SageMaker Age Manager in order to compile the model and package that model as a component that we will use afterwards to deploy to the edge compute. And talking about the deployment, we have used AWS IoT Greengrass service in order to get that model component and deploy it to the edge compute. Once we are in the edge compute, we have also used another service, SageMaker Age Manager, in order to do the inference of that image. And as I mentioned before, once we make a prediction, all this data, the input image, the output image, the count of cartridges, all this data is sent to the cloud, where we have used Amazon TimeStream and Amazon QuickSight in order to develop that dashboard that I showed you before, in order to monitor or model and have a traceability of what's happening in production. And this was kind of a high-level architecture of what is our pipeline and how that looks in AWS. And now I will hand the presentation to Jonas, that will talk about what happened in these last 2 weeks.
Yes, thank you, Carlos. So, can we repurpose the pipeline? So that is one question that we would really like to have answered, because that is one of the things that is a key indicator on is this scalable or not. So that is what we did in the last 2 weeks. We took what we did in the first 4 weeks for the cartridge count and repurposed it for a different case. And in this case, it was anomaly, Agar plate use case, which is essentially a petri dish that has a Agar substance inside of it, and we use these to take environmental samples from our production. And we do this quite a lot. So we have thousands of these that are inspected manually by our colleagues. And as you could imagine, this is quite repetitive and cumbersome inspection to do. And when you do it all day, then maybe it's not the most beneficial one. At least we see it as a good use case for machine learning and computer vision. So in this context, what we needed to do, we basically needed to check the Agar plates if there is growth or no growth on the Agar plates. So are they contaminated or are they not contaminated? And we took an anomaly detection approach to this, which means that we basically just looked at or only used the plates that had no growth on to train our model. And this we did because there is a lot of variation in the petri dish itself and this Agar substance. And there's also a lot of variance in the one that has growth. It's a natural process where bacteria grow. So that is why we took this approach. So building a model for detecting growth or no growth, we basically just took everything that we had from the previous use case and used it for used it in the pipeline that we created for the previous use case. And what we did here was that we only changed a few things in the setup. So we took, of course, a new data set because it's a different use case. And then we, of course, also had to use a different machine learning model. I mentioned it was anomaly detection approach. More specifically, we used an autoencoder to do this. And then we have, of course, also the camera settings we needed to adjust. So you can see it wasn't that much that we needed to change in order to actually have something that's functioning. So to highlight one of the things or some of the results that we have from it, I'll just show here the evaluation report that we got from the work that we did here. And here it's not so important with the performance of the model and so on. What's important here is that we were able to do the same type of evaluation as we were for the previous use case. So we can trace everything here, everything that has to do with the model. What data set do we use? What code commit was this trained on? And of course also all the performance metrics. So how well did it perform in different types of metrics? And then here you can of course also see all of the images where you can on the one side see the original image, and on the right side you can see kind of the prediction where in the image did it find an anomaly. So that was actually what we did, and now we are reaching the end of the presentation. And of course you're probably thinking, what does the future bring for us? So through this engagement, we proved to ourselves and our company that it is indeed possible to have a setup where you can take a vision use case, put it into the cloud, and have something that is working and do it in a quite fast and scalable way. So with that, we have ourselves some initiatives to do, which is continue the work on this Agar plate anomaly detection use case where we're using machine learning. And then we have the cartridge counting, which is a bit more mature use case, where we're actually now at the point where we would like to, where we're implementing it, and we have a product team that is being assembled right now to actually roll this out in our productions. Then finally, because we are working in a pharmaceutical context, and because there's of course a lot of security when it comes to having things in our production that comes from somewhere else, there's also some work for us to do in the sense of getting things from the cloud into our production. So that is actually it. And I would like to thank you for attending our session. If you have any questions for us, then feel free to reach out to either Thomas, myself, or Carlos. So thank you.